It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, live from New York, where Donald Trump has arrived ahead of becoming the first former US president to face criminal charges. Crowds have been gathering outside Trump Tower today as his lawyers ask the judge to restrict any video from inside the courtroom tomorrow.
Also tonight, Thomas Cashman is sentenced to a minimum term of 42 years. Cashman is guilty of murdering Olivia Pratt-Korbel. Outside court, her mother talked about her own life sentence, a life without her baby.
Now everything we do and everywhere we go is a constant reminder that she is not there with us. All that promise for their future so cruelly taken away.
Teachers reject the government's pay offer and vote overwhelmingly to go on strike in April and May. A woman is arrested in Russia over the killing of a pro-Putin blogger in an attack on a cafe. Oil producers, including Saudi Arabia, vow to cut production, leading to a surge in oil prices. And the family of a woman who died after being given medication in hospital for knee surgery speak to Sky News after an inquiry finds her death could have been prevented.
I was just in complete disbelief, saying, how has this possibly happened? She's came in with a broken knee, now to the point like she's dying.
And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30.
Good evening from New York, where Donald Trump is due to face a judge tomorrow over allegations that he ordered hush money to be paid to porn actress Stormy Daniels. It's the first time a former president has faced criminal charges in this country. And although we don't know what is in the indictment now, it has been revealed that there are around 30 counts of document fraud. Well, tonight, we'll tell you what to expect in the proceedings tomorrow. Plus, we'll look at what other legal challenges Donald Trump is facing and how it could impact his campaign to run for the presidency next year. But first, our US correspondent, Mark Stone, has tonight's first report.
From the gates of his Florida resort, the former president's motorcade emerging to make history. This is an extraordinary moment for America, being no doubt about that. A president's long journey from his seaside mansion to a courtroom dock. In this Floridian, Trumpian heartland, his supporters were out. But in the numbers he'd hoped for, well, his son Eric, filming from the convoy, was spinning it his father's way. Unbelievable support for miles, he tweeted. The only glimpse here of the former president on the tarmac in Palm Beach. And as he flew, his legal team, with a new attorney now among them, were putting together their defense against charges, the details of which they and we do not yet know. 1,000 miles north on New York City's Fifth Avenue, in the shadow of Trump Tower, the homecoming his supporters had promised was, well, thin, though they argued otherwise.
You cannot wait. No, I'm not the only one.
The truth is that they were outnumbered by police and by the world's media. For America's deeply partisan cable news, this is as much about ratings as it is about telling their interpretation of this moment in American history. From his fans here, a pledge that there will be no trouble. This is about supporting a president wronged, a victim of what they say is a politicized judiciary.
We know there's not going to be any violence today. Everybody here knows that.
2 blocks to the north in Central Park, beyond the circus, a real-world view from 3 siblings, their reflection of this latest chapter in the Trump story.
I think there'll be other more serious charges prior to the election.
It's hard to know.
Between January 6th and the Georgia stuff.
The legal system moves so slowly, because that's set up that way.
And he'll use that to his advantage.
Oh, of course he will, yeah.
Everything's a money-raising opportunity for him, you know, so I don't think he won't mind this that much. Maybe he's hoping for a perp walk, I don't know.
Of course, here you hardly get a representative snapshot of opinion. New York may be Trump's home, but it's not where his support is. As he arrived in New York, his legal team was engaged in last-minute arguments with the court, protesting against the prospect of cameras inside. And then, on Fifth Avenue, there he was.
And so, of all the scandals surrounding Donald Trump, in the end, it was this that forced him to court. The story of a president, a porn star, and a transaction, legal or not.
In the day ahead, we'll find out the details and the reaction across a nation stirred and divided. Mark Stone, Sky News in Manhattan.
Donald Trump travelled here to New York today. This is what will happen over the next few hours and days. President Trump's arraignment, the point at which he's told the charges he faces, will take place in a New York court from 7 o'clock UK time tomorrow. Later that same night, the former president will be flying back to Florida, where he's confirmed he will hold a news conference at 1:15 a.m. UK time. And we'll have live coverage of Donald Trump's court appearance from 7 p.m. tomorrow, here on Sky News. The charges in New York are not the only legal challenges swirling around Donald Trump. There are 3 other ongoing cases. From Florida, our US correspondent Martha Kellner has been looking at the charges and the impact they could have on another run at the presidency by Donald Trump.
For Donald Trump's most entrenched supporters, this is simply another cause to rally around. He calls it a politically motivated witch hunt, and they believe him.
They're so frightened of him, they don't know what to do.
This is a watershed moment, but perhaps the most remarkable fact is that this is not even the most serious of the potential criminal charges that Donald Trump may face.
Legal jeopardy abounds for the former president, not least over an FBI investigation and raid of his Mar-a-Lago home. Officers finding top-secret documents here that had disappeared with Trump from the White House. A probe is ongoing too into whether he interfered with a 2020 election count in Georgia.
We fight like hell, and if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
And perhaps most grave of all, the allegation that he incited violence, leading to the January the 6th storming of the Capitol.
I'd say he's in a mess. He's in a heap of trouble.
Some experts believe this indictment could prompt charges in other cases.
Now he has got the label of a criminal defendant in an ongoing prosecution. So it may not be the crime of the century, but it does go to the heart and essence of what many think he is, a fraudster. And so once you get charged the first time, I think it's probably easier on the system itself to get charged again.
But Trump's legal problems may conversely be giving him a political boost. Polls show his support among Republican voters is surging.
The charges facing Donald Trump do not dissuade Republican primary voters at all. They rally some of them to his cause. There's a very small sliver of the Republican Party that views Trump as problematic or is troubled by these charges, but they already weren't supporting Donald Trump anyway, so it's really irrelevant.
Team Trump says he's raised over $7 million in campaign donations in the 5 days since his indictment became public knowledge. Proof, perhaps, that in Trump's world, even criminal charges can be given a positive spin. Martha Kellner, Sky News, West Palm Beach.
It has been quite a day. It will be quite the day tomorrow. That's it from New York for now. We'll have more from here, though, just before 10:30.
James, thank you. Thomas Cashman, the man who murdered 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Korbel, will spend at least 42 years in prison. Cashman did not appear in court today after refusing to be present for the sentencing. He has always denied any involvement in the shooting. Olivia's mother gave a statement outside court in which she spoke about her chatty girl being cruelly taken away. Our crime correspondent Martin Brunt was there and has this report.
She had shed tears in court, but outside, Olivia's mother, Cheryl, was composed in a tribute to her murdered daughter.
Liv was the light of our lives, a sassy, chatty girl who never ran out of energy. She was a character, She was my baby and she has amazing qualities and knew what she wanted in life. Now everything we do and everywhere we go is a constant reminder that she is not there with us. All that promise for her future so cruelly taken away.
Olivia's killer, Thomas Cashman, was given life with a minimum sentence of 42 years before any chance of parole. By then, he'll be 76.
We welcome the sentence given, but what I can say is that my family and I have already started our life sentence, having to spend the rest of our lives without Olivia.
Cashman was chasing and shooting another criminal, Joseph Nee. When the fleeing victim ran into the Korbel house, Cashman kept firing and hit Olivia.
As children do, Olivia was coming downstairs to seek reassurance. Cheryl Korbel should have been able to give that reassurance and to tuck Olivia back into bed. What's happened instead was chilling and strikes fear not only into the immediate community, but also into the minds of other children and their parents. Shooting into a family home with no regard for who may be caught in the crossfire is obviously a very significant aggravating factor which must be reflected in the minimum term.
Olivia's teenage sister Chloe read a personal statement to the court. She said, "I grieve for what we will never get to do together. I miss sharing my bedroom with her and hearing her talk all of the time. All the things we should be doing or would be doing as she got older, confiding in one another, shopping together, laughing and making memories." Cashman didn't come into court to hear his sentence. His lawyer said he was aware that after his conviction last week, Crown prosecutors were overheard singing the song "We Are the Champions." Cashman was concerned. The case was turning into a circus. Olivia's father, John Pratt, told the court he had to leave Liverpool. He couldn't cope with well-meaning people asking him about his daughter.
Olivia Pratt-Korbel died a scared 9-year-old, and we hope Cashman is haunted by this knowledge for the rest of his life.
Police said they hoped Cashman's long sentence would act as a deterrent to anyone thinking of picking up a gun and putting communities at risk. Martin Brunt, Sky News, Manchester Crown Court.
Teachers have voted to reject the pay offer by the government today and will be going ahead with strike action on the 27th of April and the 2nd of May. The government says the union's decision will result in more disruption for children and less money for teachers. Passport Office staff began their 5 weeks of industrial action today, which could cause severe delays processing passports. Junior doctors in England will walk out for 4 days, beginning on April the 11th. 10 days of strike action by security guards at Heathrow Airport is continuing. It ends at midnight on Easter Sunday. More than 130,000 civil servants will strike on April the 28th. And teachers in England are to hold 2 more days of walkouts on April the 27th and also on May the 2nd. Sabah Chowdhury has been speaking to teachers and students.
What type of process would actually require mitochondria here?
It's crunch time for these Year 11s. It may be the Easter holidays, but in 5 weeks' time, they'll be sitting their GCSEs. And so, students are knuckling down. They're about to lose more time because of further strike action.
Exams are right around the corner, pressure's really mounting, but we are sympathetic to their cause and we do want teachers to get a higher pay.
They should be on strike if they're not getting the pay they deserve. Like teachers in my school, they stay until like 6 or 7 o'clock in the evening.
A majority of 98% today voted to reject the government's latest pay offer, calling it simply unacceptable.
This generation so hard hit by COVID, the government should be investing in them, trying to reverse this problem right now. So we regret the disruption to children's education, but our action does have a higher moral purpose.
Gillian, we need to say to you, you are not reading the room.
Gillian, why do you think teachers in England are worth less than teachers in Scotland and Wales?
The Education Secretary, Gillian Keegan, says she's extremely disappointed by the NEU's decision to reject her deal, one she says was made in good faith, offering a 4.5% average pay rise to teachers, a one-off payment of £1,000 and an introduction of 30 grand starting salaries for most teachers. But still, not enticing enough for Mr. Islam, who says he's so fed up he wants to pack up teaching entirely.
At some point, we have to put the workload impact to one side and our passion to one side and realise that actually we can't continue doing this because we're going to drain ourselves out. That's going to impact the students in the long term.
Teachers say the strikes are a last resort and are willing to negotiate with the government. A lot can change in 3 weeks. Sabah Chowdhury, Sky News.
A Russian anti-war activist has been detained, accused of being responsible for an attack on a cafe in St. Petersburg. Russian officials released a video showing Daria Trepova, a 26-year-old woman, appearing to take responsibility for the explosion which killed a pro-war blogger. Sky's Moscow correspondent Diana Magnay reports.
As investigators picked through the bombed-out remains of the cafe where military blogger Maxim Fomin, otherwise known as Vladimir Tatarsky, was killed, the hunt was on for this girl, Daria Trepova, seen here carrying the small statue thought to be filled with explosives, which she'd presented to Tatarsky shortly before the bomb went off. The question is whether the 26-year-old knew what the statue contained. She was detained this morning. In a statement released clearly under duress, she admitted she'd brought the statue to the cafe, but refused to say who'd given it to her. Russia's investigative committee claims that Trepova was working together with Ukraine's security services and with Alexei Navalny's anti-corruption foundation, which is labelled both as a foreign agent and an extremist organisation in Russia. Her husband believes that she was framed. Street food bar number 1 once belonged to Wagner boss Yevgeny Prigozhin. As he hoisted the flag over the Ukrainian town of Bakhmut today, claiming he'd finally captured it, he dedicated the flag to Tatarsky's memory, adding this in a separate audio message.
Но я бы не стал обвинять киевский режим в этих действиях. Я думаю, что действуют группы радикалов, которые вряд ли имеют отношение к правительству. Я бы так это назвал.
Tatarsky will have had many enemies. A former convict, originally from Makiivka near Donetsk, he had fought in separatist battalions against Ukraine since 2014. And as an ultra-nationalist blogger, he did not shy away from criticism of Russia's military command either. Kyiv denies involvement. But on the Russian front lines today, his name was remembered. Diana Magnay, Sky News, Moscow.
US officials have confirmed a Chinese spy balloon that flew over America was able to transmit sensitive military intelligence. In an exclusive story by our partners at NBC News, it's claimed that Beijing was able to guide the device over military sites and send back information in real time. Our Asia correspondent Helen Ann Smith joins us now from Beijing. And Helen Ann, have Beijing responded to these latest revelations?
They haven't responded yet. It's possible that will come later today, China time. But look, it was only going to be a matter of time before the Americans were able to gather up that debris that was so notably shot down over the ocean and analyse it, and before that analysis hit the headlines. And although this isn't an official White House release, it nonetheless offers really interesting detail about what that balloon was likely doing. Now, our colleagues at NBC have sourced this to 2 senior administration officials and 1 former administration officials. They say the balloon was actually being controlled remotely, that it took multiple passes over some of those sensitive military sites. In fact, even travelling in a figure-of-8 formation, which apparently is quite difficult to do. They say that contrary to a lot of expectation, it wasn't actually taking photographs, but it was gathering intelligence via the interception of electric signals, either from the weapons themselves down American bases or from the personnel on those bases. And crucially, that information was being sent back to Beijing in real time. Intriguingly, apparently there was also a self-destruct function on that balloon, and for whatever reason, that was never hit, and it's not sure whether the Chinese decided not to self-destruct or that malfunctioned in some way. Now, look, the White House officially has said it can't confirm these reports, but both it and the officials sourced in this story said that the balloon would have been able to gather more intelligence were it not for efforts from the Biden administration to thwart it, to block some of those signals. As I said, no response from China yet, but you can expect them to resolutely stick to that line that this was a civilian aircraft gathering for weather purposes, that the American move to shoot it down was an inflammatory overreaction. It's worth just taking a step back and remembering how far things have deteriorated between the two nations since this happened in the early weeks of February. The new details make the China line slightly harder to sell and certainly won't repair any relations between these two major superpowers at this stage.
For the moment, thank you. We'll await that response from Beijing. For Linda Allen, going into hospital for knee injury was meant to be a straightforward procedure, but a complication with her medicine led to her death. Now an inquiry has found her death could have been prevented. Our Scotland correspondent, Conor Gillies, has been speaking to her family.
She was the best person ever. She was a rock, life soul of the party. Just an amazing person, not just to us, to everybody.
She was just 59 years old. Linda Allen hurt her knee and got successful surgery here at this hospital in Fife back in 2019. It was the aftercare where things went badly wrong.
When Mum was admitted into A&E, she told them that she didn't take naproxen, the anti-inflammatory drug. It was documented on her notes that she no longer takes.
She was given it, even though her notes said not to?
Yes, she was given it, yes.
I was just in complete disbelief, saying, how has this possibly happened? She's came in with a broken knee, now to the point like she's dying.
An inquiry has now ruled Linda's death could have been prevented after she was given medication which, within hours, reacted with a large stomach ulcer, causing cardiac arrest and multiple organ failure.
Do you believe this hospital killed your mum?
Yes, 100%. Yeah,
100%.
And I think because her pain score had went from 0 to 10, and reading that in sort of the statements and things, and still not being told then that my mum was seriously ill. She was there alone with no family, which I really feel for her.
Officials in this inquiry say chances to detect Linda's deteriorating condition were missed, and the care she received fell well below the expected standards. NHS Fife has accepted a raft of recommendations to avoid future deaths on their watch.
I spoke to Mum on the phone whilst on holiday, and she told me, and I said to her, you're going to have to say something because I know what you're like, Mum. And she was like, yeah, I promise. I said, because if you don't, I'm going to call the hospital. And again, another regret, I didn't call the hospital. I didn't call, which, it's not easy.
Was that one of the last conversations that you had with your mum?
Yep.
Right.
Conor Gillies, Sky News.
Finland will officially join NATO tomorrow and become the 31st member of the alliance. NATO's Secretary-General, Jens Stoltenberg, says it will be a good day for the country's security and for NATO. Russia said it will strengthen its military capacity along its border with Finland.
It's not for Moscow to decide who is going to be a member of NATO or not. It's for the applicant countries and for NATO to decide. And this is very clearly demonstrated here at the NATO headquarters tomorrow when we raise the Finnish flag and finalise the Finnish accession process.
Tributes are being paid to the former Conservative Chancellor Nigel Lawson, who's died at the age of 91. He was Chancellor in Margaret Thatcher's government from 1983 to 1989. The current Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said one of the first things he did when he became Chancellor was to hang Nigel Lawson's picture above his desk. Timothy Schofield, who's the brother of the television presenter Philip Schofield, has been found guilty of sexually abusing a child. During the trial, the jury heard Timothy Schofield had told his brother Philip he'd watched pornography with the boy when he was over the age of 16. Today, the TV presenter said if any crime had been confessed to him, he would have acted immediately to protect the victim. Global oil prices jumped today after some of the world's major producers announced a cut to production. Brent crude, the international oil benchmark, jumped more than 5% this morning following the announcement. Our climate and energy correspondent Hannah Thomas-Peter can explain more.
The price of oil matters because it impacts the cost of everything from consumer goods to manufacturing and to fuel, making it a key driver of inflation. That's why this group of 13 nations, known as OPEC, short for the Organisation of Petroleum Exporting Countries, is so influential. They're often joined by 10 other oil-producing nations, including Russia. This group is referred to as OPEC Plus and produces about 40% of the world's crude oil. Their supply, relative to global demand, has a huge impact on price. So let's take a look at this graph showing the price per barrel of Brent crude oil over the last 3 years, just to see a few examples. So this is when COVID hit back in early 2020. The world shut down, meaning a huge slump in demand and a collapse in price. By contrast, this is when Russia invaded Ukraine early last year, and there was concern about an oil shortage, sending the price well above $120 per barrel. Since then, there's generally speaking been weaker demand from China and fears of a global economic contraction. But on Sunday, there was a bit of a surprise. Saudi Arabia, Iraq and several Gulf states all unexpectedly announced they would cut supply by more than 1 million barrels a day. And the result? Brent crude up by more than 5%. But for some, this isn't just about price, it's about power. And Saudi Arabia defying America's request to keep supply steady.
If a decision is taken by one of the largest producers in there, let's say Saudis, and the other countries from the cartel are taken on board, then this is basically the major bulk of the market is able to move in concert. And there is very little in terms of political or market leverage the other oil producers can do. And there is also very little the oil consumers can do, aside from actually doubling down and reducing our oil demand.
But that might be challenging. Even with the global push to decarbonise, there are predictions that world oil demand is likely to accelerate sharply this year as air travel rebounds and China opens up again after COVID.
Welcome back to New York, where Donald Trump will hear what criminal charges he is facing tomorrow. Here at Trump Tower, crowds of supporters of the former president have been gathering all day as he travelled from his home in Florida to this city. My colleague Mark Stone joins me now. Mark, details are pretty thin on the ground about how tomorrow will play out in court, but we have learned something.
Yeah, I mean, it's worth remembering that none of us really knows what these charges are. Plenty of people have already said that this is a witch hunt, that this shouldn't have come this far legally. But no one actually knows the details of this. The grand jury, whose job is a little bit like our own Crown Prosecution Service, they decide whether or not there is enough to press charges. They decided that there was enough, but we don't know what that is, and we will discover more over the course of the next day or so. But yes, there are legal arguments ongoing. They're making this up as they go along. There's an argument right now about whether or not cameras will be allowed in court. Will we get to see Donald Trump in the courtroom? At the moment, no. But there is a push by the American media for that to happen. Donald Trump's lawyers, interestingly, do not want that to happen. Some might have thought that he would want to make a spectacle of this. It's looking as though he does not want that. So that's interesting. The argument that his lawyers are using is that it would make a circus of all of this. Well, I have to say today, it's already looking like a bit of a circus. A word briefly on his supporters. I don't think there have been that many here in New York. There was a call for many to join, to come here as a sort of homecoming. This, of course, is his city, but his support base is not here, was never here. Down in Mar-a-Lago in Florida, not many people there either. I think that's interesting. We'll see how many turn up tomorrow. Marjorie Taylor Greene is a congresswoman, one of his key supporters. Will be here tomorrow. She's calling for many, many people to come. We'll see.
Mark Stone, many thanks. So, this is legal and political history in a criminal court in New York's Bowery. There's never been a criminal case against a former US president in Manhattan's district courthouse. There never has been anywhere. As Donald Trump spends the evening in his apartment on the top floors of Trump Tower, the unprecedented president knows he will be the first when they called the case, his case, the people of the state of New York against Donald J. Trump.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's newspapers in the press preview, including this story on the front of the Metro after the jailing of Thomas Cashman for the murder of Olivia Pratt-Korbel. Their headline, gutless. Tonight, we're joined by the journalist and broadcaster Jenny Kleeman and the political editor of the Daily Telegraph, Ben Riley Smith. Do stay with us for more.